Welcome to Tea with Tanya podcast. Every week, I'll be brewing up a perfect blend of public health stories, which will include maternal and reproductive health, career and academic advice, self-love, health, and wellness tips. Join me, your host, Tanya. I'm a public health professional working in maternal health. I'm a birth and postpartum doula, a placenta encapsulation specialist, and certified lactation counselor by day. And I'm your average tea-loving millennial and content creator by night. So pour yourself up a cup of tea and join me in the tea tasting room for your weekly dose of inspiration, where you are the center of our conversation. This podcast is here to serve you. So come take a sip with me and let's start promoting positive living together. Hey, welcome back to Tea with Tanya. I'm your host, Tanya, where we talk all things public health, maternal health, and wellness. Now, as we continue on with the maternal health series, today we're going to be talking about a very important topic that affects or impacts all expectant parents. And that topic is choosing the right birth worker for your delivery. But before we get into today's episode, I want to share the affirmation of the week, which is just so in time and in tune with this episode. And it is, I am the best advocate for myself. So this week's affirmation is, I am the best advocate for myself. And that came to mind because I recently had an experience at the doctor's office. It wasn't bad, wasn't anything negative. I went in for a follow-up because of a situation that would have happened to me a few weeks prior, and I had to have a follow-up appointment. Met with my doctor, and we were having a discussion, and one of the next things, I thought I went into the appointment for a particular treatment or a particular thing to happen, when in fact that did not happen. It was something totally different. I ended up being put on meds and all these different things. And I'm a person, I'm not opposed to taking meds, but I'm allergic to so many different medications that I oftentimes get scared when I have to take medication, because the side effects, if there's like a million side effects, you can guarantee that I'm going to have at least 10 of those things happening to me. So I had to go back and forth with my doctor. Why aren't we doing this particular thing today? Why am I starting meds and all these different things? And of course, she was very pleasant and she did explain everything to me. And while I was sitting there, I remember thinking, what about those who may not know the right questions to ask, may be afraid to ask these questions? Because I was one of those individuals back in the day where I used to be scared to ask my doctor questions about why they're giving me this medication or why am I doing X, Y, Z. So I was very pleased and proud with myself over the last few years where I've been able to speak up for myself and got the answers that I needed. So I thought about, wow, I am the best advocate for myself. Of course, I'm sure there's someone out there who can help me advocate for myself much better, because we don't know everything essentially. But during that time, that's when that affirmation came to me, and I wrote it in my journal saying, I am the best advocate for myself. And this does not only apply to when you have a doctor appointment, dentist appointment, whatever medical appointment you may have. It also applies to in your workplace. You could be at your work, at your job, and you have to also advocate for yourself. I'm going to tell you that. Yes, you may have good managers, good co-workers, but you're going to always have to advocate for yourself, even in your regular 9-to-5 job as well. So that's where today's affirmation came from. So I'm going to say it one more time before we get into today's episode. It is, I am the best advocate for myself. I am the best advocate for myself. So, all right, guys, we're going to get into today's episode as you join me here in the tea tasting room, choosing the right birth worker for your delivery. A birth worker can be a doula, a midwife, an obstetrician, because they typically play a critical role in helping you bring your baby into this world. So, of course, choosing the right birth worker is an important decision. And it's also essential that you find someone who aligns with your values, beliefs, and birth plans. And I say birth plans because you want to make sure you have a plan. There's no such thing as a perfect birth. It may be a perfect birth for you, but you want to ensure that you have a plan so that you have a backup to that plan should something not go according to the way in which you want it to go. So I will say this, a birth worker. So when I'm referring to choosing the right birth worker for your delivery, A birth worker can be a doula, it can be a midwife, and it can be an obstetrician, because we all play, and I say we because as you guys know, I am a doula, we all play an important role in helping you to bring your baby into this world safe and sound. So some of the questions to choose the right worker, I've put together a list of questions that you should ask during your initial consultation. And one of the questions that I get asked a lot, and I would want to be asked, and I want to ask when I'm in that position, is what is your experience and education in delivering babies? And this is a very important question. Granted, all the questions here that I'm going to list that you should be asking, they are all important. But of course, you want to know what experience does one have, what education the person that's going to be delivering your baby has. It's very important to know about the qualifications and experience of the birth worker provider you're considering. This can include your education, your certifications, and years of experience in this field. With this question, I remember when I first became a doula, obviously having zero experience when it came to delivering babies. And my first client, I remember them asking me, what is my experience? And I'm like, I am literally fresh out of doula training school. I have zero experience in delivering a real baby. And I remember feeling intimidated by that question, or being ashamed or embarrassed, or I guess that imposter syndrome, creeped in a little bit, because I was like, here I go trying to assist a family with just my training from my 3 weeks of training for my doula program. And I remember them asking me that questions, and I got a bit offended. I will be honest and transparent. I got a bit offended. Then I also realized, girl, if you were in my position, would you want somebody with zero experience? But at the same time, I say that we can only be experienced if we were given the opportunity. And, thank you to that family for recognizing that I was fresh out of doula school, eager to learn, eager to help deliver their baby. And as they would have told me, that my energy is what made them choose me. So it wasn't even about my experience, but it was just my energy and the values that I also shared with them. When I mention experience, I want you to know, of course, that you may be dealing with someone who may be fresh out of school, may not have many births under their belt, but they are eager to learn, they are willing, they are compassionate, and they are willing to help you get the best birth experience as possible. So, of course, you want to know the experience and education. But I will say, from my personal experience, all a person needs is just one chance. Now, as far as the education standpoint, you want to make sure that they have some sort of training, because there are a lot of people who parade around here acting like they are something that they're not, and they don't have the right education to back up the limited experience that they may have. So you definitely want to make sure that a person is trained, they're certified, or they are qualified from an educational standpoint when it comes to being your birth worker provider. So if you're understanding what I'm saying, I am saying that, you want to ask the question about their experience and education. But speaking from my personal experience, sometimes the lack of experience does not make a person not be valuable or ready to take on that role as your birth worker provider. And do ensure that they do have the right training and education to let you have the birth that you desire. Another question you want to ask is, what is your birth worker's philosophy on childbirth, and how do they approach labor and delivery? So what is your birth worker provider philosophy on childbirth, and how do you approach labor and delivery? So it's very important that you find a provider whose beliefs and value aligns with yours. So asking about their approach to childbirth can help you determine if they're a good fit for you. So if you listen and you heard I said previously, when I had my first clients, and one of the questions that they asked me was my experience and, of course, my education. And while I had the education and experience in healthcare in general as well, I didn't have as much experience as it related to labor and delivery or maternal health. And I felt a bit embarrassed by that, but I had to let myself know that you have the education, you have experience in other healthcare practices, and you had the education and training to become a doula. But one of the reasons why they told me that they went with me was because my philosophy and my approach to labor and delivery was in alignment with them. So even though you want to ensure that the person that's going to be there helping you to bring your baby to this world, you want to ensure that your values are in alignment with each other. It makes no sense to pick someone when you have doubts about it, because that's going to only add more anxiety and stress unnecessarily to your life. So ensure that your birth worker provider philosophy on childbirth is in alignment with your values as well. And then another question here is, what is your experience with natural birth, pain management, and medical interventions? And that's also a big question for me and as a birth worker that we oftentimes being asked. Because a lot of times when you hear about a doula or even a midwife, most times based on what I've heard and I've seen is that we think, oh, they're all about no medication. It's just all natural, no pain meds. That's all we're about. I know, but this is an important question to ask your birth worker because it helps you to understand our approach to birth and our experience with different methods of pain relief and intervention. And it gives you an idea, again, whether our philosophy aligns with yours. Some birth workers may be more hands-off approach and focus on natural birth, while others are open to medical interventions when necessary. And I want to point out here that we are ultimately, like this is for me, we are ultimately here to support you and make sure that you are as comfortable as possible when it comes to your birth. So I don't want you to believe that a birth worker by way of a midwife or even a doula, we're only here to take a hands-off approach, no pain medication. No, at the end of the day, you are what matters. You're important. Your comfort level is important. I know for me, as part of my education with my clients, I tend to go over the different types of birth, the different medications, and what other adverse effect they may have on a client. Everyone would not have the same reaction to a particular medication, but we're going to go over what it's like to have a natural birth, what are the pros and cons, not really many cons per se, but what are the pros and cons of both a medicated and unmedicated birth so that you know what you're getting yourself into. So you definitely want to know what your birth worker's experience is when it comes to natural birth, pain management, and medical intervention. So that's going to let you know that it's in alignment with you and make you more relaxed and comfortable and be able to trust your birth worker. Another one is, how do you handle emergency situations and what is the protocol for transferring care to a hospital? So obviously this is pointing out if you are in the process or you plan on giving a home birth, how does your birth worker handle emergency situation? So it is important to know how they handle emergencies, including their experience with handling emergencies during birth. And it's also very, very important to understand their protocol for transferring care to a hospital in the event that medical intervention is required. And of course, this information is very important because it can help you feel confident, prepared in case of an emergency. Because granted, when you are choosing your birth worker, you would have gone through the list of, like I would have mentioned, what are your values and beliefs when it comes to birth? What are your education and experience with birth and labor and delivery? So you want to ensure that we are equipped to handle any emergencies. For me, I have not personally had that experience where I had a home birth or a birth where a client had to be transferred, but I am very prepared. I have the training, the education, and the knowledge to know when it's time for us to transfer if mom or baby is in danger. So you want to ensure that your birth worker do know what their protocols are for transferring mom and baby to the hospital. I remember reading one of my friend's birth story, and we had her on the podcast last week and before, Gianna. She shared her birth story over on her website, and she had a home birth. And I remember, based on reading her story and just with talking to her, everything was going well with her water birth. She was at home. She was in the comfort of her home. She trusted her midwife, her husband, her support team. She trusted them. And to put into context, she had a 10-pound baby. I'm just going to say that right here. She had a 10-pound baby that she was pushing out, okay? I remember her saying that she felt her baby in her pelvis, like he was stuck. And of course, the different interventions, again, this comes down to the experience and knowledge of your birth worker. They can tell, birth worker can mean your doula and your midwife, who you have at your birth, or even your obstetrician as well, depending on what location you're giving birth at. And I remember her saying her midwife, they did different interventions to change the position of the baby because, again, she said she felt the baby was stuck in her pelvis. And it turns out that the baby's shoulder was indeed stuck and the baby had a type of shoulder dystocia. And after that, shortly after, while that was happening, her midwife went ahead, even doing all these interventions, the midwife went ahead and Gianna mentioned that she heard someone saying, call 911 very calmly. Because also, even though we're in an emergency situation, I do want to point out here, as a fellow birth worker, for a birth worker who's listening and just a potential client for anyone or a potential expectant, families, even though something is an emergency, you also, as a birth worker, want to ensure that you're portraying calmness. It's the most sacred time of your life, and you want to ensure that you are calm, that you are not, for lack of a better word, freaking out your client or the birthing person to also, create unnecessary stress and anxiety. It's already a sacred moment. It's already, to some, even though they may trust their birth worker and their body, it's still scary because anything can happen. So you want to ensure that you always remain some level of calmness throughout any sort of emergencies, even when there is not even an emergency. But when you can tell that your client is scared, you want to portray the qualities of someone who's calm. So I say all that to say you want to ensure that your birth worker knows what their protocol is when it comes to emergency. Because then I remember that story just came to mind about Gianna when she felt her baby being stuck, communicated with her midwife. They did different interventions, but to be on the safe side, the midwife went ahead and called 911. And by the time she did deliver the baby was healthy, but they knew they had to go to the hospital to ensure that everything was okay and needed to be, hooked up to any monitors. Baby didn't swallow any meconium, whatever it may be. So they chose that route. Even she got her home birth, but just to be on the safe side, they decided to transfer her and baby to the hospital just to ensure that everything was okay. So you definitely want to understand what protocols your birth worker have as it relates to transferring care to a hospital should it come to that. Another question you want to ask is, how do we work with your partner and support team during labor and delivery? And as a doula, I often say we are here to support birthing families. We do not catch babies. That's also a myth. Doulas do not catch babies. We're here to provide you with all the resources and education and support that you may need. And of course, that includes involving your support system, your partner, whether it be a husband, a girlfriend, whatever it may be, and your mom, dad, whoever you deemed as your partner. We're going to talk about this in another episode as well when it comes to choosing your birth partner. But as a doula, we're here. For me, I'm here to get dad, mom, partner involved as much as possible. So I'm providing education to my expectant individual, but also to their partner, the support person. You're also going to be involved. So you're going to know what to expect so that you can come prepared. So it's important for us to know, or to ensure that your birth worker is able to work collaboratively with your partner and support team to create a supportive environment during labor and delivery. And outside of a doula, and of course the partner for the expectant mom, this means also your midwife, your obstetrician, your nurses, whatever the setting is where you will be giving birth, you want to ensure that these people know, we all know that we are part of a team. No one is going to be the superior over the other. We are all a part of a team, and it's going to be a collaborative effort to ensuring that the birthing person has the best outcome for their birth. So I often tell my clients, it doesn't matter where you're giving birth at, always make sure that you state to your healthcare provider that you have a doula. That way they know a doula is involved, so we work as a team and no one is looking down on your doula in any negative way. And I say looking down because I had an experience where I had a birth, and for some reason this doctor was not a fan of a doula. He didn't see my point. He didn't know why I needed to be there. He didn't even know why I was taking the placenta after the birth. He was just outright mean. Like, he was so mean that I hate to say the Antiguan in me, but I almost had to, get real Antiguan as far as like speaking all that dialect on him. But of course, I'm a professional, so I had to leave it that way. You know what I mean? Like, he was not here for a doula, even though he knew that my client evidently had a doula. He just did not respect me and kept telling me, get out of the way. I was not even in his way. He was just being me. But I stood my ground because at the end of the day, I was there for my client. So you definitely want to ensure that everyone is involved. Everyone who's involved in your birth are able to work in a collaborative effort, because it also eliminates the stress and makes you feel comfortable when it comes to birth. Another question is that I get asked a lot too is, how do you handle unexpected outcomes or complications during birth? And that's similar to the, how do you handle emergency situations? Again, you want to ensure that your birth worker has experience with different complications. They're able to calm you, reassure you as best as they can, because at the end of the day, we don't always know what's going to happen, but they're able to reassure you as best as you can throughout any sort of complication, whatever that level of complication may be. You want to ensure that they're able to support you and be of support for you. Another question as we wind on, another question is finding out what is the availability of your birth worker for labor and delivery and how you can contact them in case of an emergency. And I remember in my doula training, I will never forget this, our trainer, Annette, she said, you want to make sure that you are there for your client. Sometimes it depends on how many births you may have. I remember at one point she told us as we were starting out to be mindful of how many births in a year or how many births in a month we may be taking, because you don't want to have any clash when it comes to supporting your client. So you definitely want to make sure that your client is available. How can you get in contact with your birth worker? For me, for most of my clients, when it comes to from the minute they hit 34, 35 weeks, I am available to them 24/7 via text, email, call, whatever it may be. They know they can call me. And if I have any questions, I am there for them. And it's also important to point out here that you have and this is from a doula perspective, you have a backup doula. And I'm sure that's the case with a midwife or even a doctor as well. They have many different backups. If you're in a hospital, of course, it may not be the doctor that you've been seeing these last few months. You may end up having a different doctor who's just as capable as well. But I also understand sometimes the level of being comfortable, like you've been dealing with this one doctor all these different months, never even met another doctor, only for you to have that person because your doctor may have been on another birth or something may have happened. So you definitely want to check the availability. But as from a doula perspective, we oftentimes have a backup doula because life be lifing. Life happens, okay? So we oftentimes have a backup doula. And I want to give a shout out to two people, my girl Rebecca and Susan. Like I've been their backup doula and vice versa because we do not play. The minute that client signs on, Susan is going to ask me, what is your availability? Do you have availability for this month, this due date? And of course, I'll check my calendar and I will see, because we want to ensure that our client or the client is getting the best experience as possible. And when I say backup doula, I'm not just coming in the day of birth to support said client. We are having our childbirth classes, all our sessions, prenatal sessions together, both the main and backup doula, so that the client is comfortable not only with the main doula, but also with the backup doula. So when that time comes, there's no tension and the client can feel as supported as possible. So you definitely want to know what is availability and how you can contact your provider. But I just gave you my perspective from a doula, but I know in some settings, your doctor that you've been seeing for months may not be the one that's going to oftentimes helps you be there to deliver your baby, because life be life and things happen. It's very rare, but it can happen. So you want to find out that availability as well. And another question is providing references from other patients so the client can speak with. And this question, and the reason why I listed this question, because I had a client who did that. That was my first time having that. And I'm going to be honest, I felt a little bit, I keep saying embarrassed. I don't know if it's embarrassed or I was taken aback. And it wasn't that, because when I think about it, obviously if I'm getting hired for a job, they ask you to list 2 to 3 references. If you're applying to grad school or any school, they're going to ask you to list 2 to 3 references so that they can speak on the experience of the person that they are hiring or the person that they are wanting to accept, So that's it. Just again, references are important. So I remember when they had asked me that, I was like, okay. Got a bit nervous. I'm like, oh my God, I've never had anyone ask for a review, but I know my stuff. I lead with my heart, so I wasn't necessarily worried. So when they asked me that I had to provide 2 to 3 previous clients, of course, I had to make sure that it was okay for these clients to reach out to each other, and they did that. So it's okay to ask for references from previous clients if there is, because people want to ensure that they can trust. Because again, the relationship between a birth worker provider and a client or patient is very important. It demands a level of trust that I didn't even realize was a thing until I got into this work. So definitely you want to ask your birth worker, can you provide me with some references? And that's okay. Because sometimes you could be seeing a doctor for months and for some reason there's a lack of connection and then you end up just switching your provider, and that's okay. So you definitely want to have references. Now, I know sometimes in some settings as it relates to maybe a doctor or even a midwife, the likelihood of being able to speak to a patient directly might be slim. We got to think about HIPAA, but that's why it's important to read reviews on said website. But when it comes down to a doula, it's a little bit much more freer where you can provide information without violating any privacy laws or privacy rules, but they can know, okay, I can trust my doula because this person said that. Sometimes you may not even have the reference, but you can speak to a co-worker or someone who knows your work ethic and know that you're passionate about maternal health as well. So you definitely want to ask for references. That's a big one when it comes to your birth. And of course, people want to know, how can you support? What support? We're here to advocate. Like I would have mentioned with that affirmation early in the episode, you are the best advocate for yourself. But I also mentioned that it's okay to have another person advocate for you. So, asking your birth worker provider about their support during labor and birth can help you understand what kind of care you can expect from them, including comfort measures, advocacy, and emotional support. Because birth takes a lot of heart work for both the support person and the birthing person. So you definitely want to ensure that you're able to understand what kind of care and the level of care you can expect from us. And that includes comfort measures, like I would have mentioned about whether it's pain or pain-free. Doesn't matter what it is, comfort measures, how we're going to advocate for you and what type of emotional support we are going to give to you as well. So these are some important questions to ask your birth worker provider as well. The last question I do want to say is, let's talk about the importance of communication. It's very important that the right birth worker for you may not be the same for someone else. So I would have mentioned about having a reference earlier and wanting to see if that person is for you. It's very important to know that that birth worker may be the best thing since sliced bread to, let's say, your friend or someone that you may know, but that person may not be right for you for whatever reason. So it's very important that you find someone who listens to you, respects your wishes, and makes you feel comfortable and supported. And it's also very important that you have an open and honest communication or conversation with your birth worker throughout your pregnancy and delivery. Communication is key. I know sometimes that's like cliche. Oh, communication is key. We keep talking about that. But let me tell you, communication is key. I think personally, I have even improved my communication skills just from being a doula. Also, I also understand that I may not be the right fit for a client. Sometimes even after some consultations, I may not feel 100% confident. Sometimes I may have to turn a client down and maybe refer that client to another birth worker, someone that I may know. And it's not anything negative or anything bad, but sometimes you can just tell when it may not be a fit. So that's why I say it's important to communicate and for you to understand and remember that every birth worker may not be for you, no matter how many references you may have. Granted, again, like I said, it's very rare that would happen or that can happen, but it is possible. It is a possibility. So you definitely want to have good communication skills between client and birth worker. And then I do want to point out as we wrap up, but one last thing, because I want to talk about postpartum care really quickly. Find out how your birth worker handles postpartum care, because postpartum care is a very important part of the birthing process. And it's important to know what kind of care you can expect from your provider during that time. Postpartum that's the fourth stage or fourth phase of pregnancy or of birth. You definitely want to know what kind of care is your care provider, again, by way of your midwife or doula. Are they going to give you a follow-up visit a day or two after? Obviously, we know you got to go take your baby to see a doctor or a provider. But what does that support look like? Am I going to have someone who's going to be there to help me with lactation, breastfeeding? Am I going to have someone to support me because I'm going to be a very tired mom going forward? So find out how your birth worker handles postpartum care. And as I wrap up, I do want to say it's important to remember that the provider that you choose will be a significant part of your birth experience. So please take your time when selecting one. I'm going to say this again. It is very important that you remember that the provider, the birth worker provider that you choose will be a significant part of your birth experience. So take your time when selecting one. Because when you have that baby and that baby's 5, 10, 15, 21 years old and you're going to be telling them about the birth experience with them, you almost are going to always remember that birth worker, your support team that was with you. They play a significant role, a significant part of your birth experience. Consider meeting with several providers and asking them questions to help you make an informed decision before it's time for you to give birth. So consider meeting with several providers and asking them questions to help you make an informed decision about choosing your birth worker or your birth worker provider. And I want to point this out because I would have mentioned sometimes me realizing that I may not be a fit for a particular family or client. Please remember this. It's also very important to trust your instincts and choose someone who makes you feel comfortable and supported. I would have mentioned earlier in this episode, having the client, I had zero experience with labor and delivery, and the client that chose me said to me that they felt my energy. They seemed or felt like it was in alignment with them, and that is why they chose me. Obviously, I didn't have much experience, and they could have easily said, no, we don't want you. You don't even have a breath under your belt. Why am I choosing you? But they felt my energy, and they felt comfortable, and they, in turn, trusted their instinct. Just like me, when I would have turned on a client, I had to trust my gut. Because let me tell you guys, when I go against my gut, I almost always get into some sort of chaos, some sort of issue. So I want you, if you don't take away anything else from this episode, take away this. It's okay to meet with several birth worker providers to make sure that you can help you make an informed decision. But it's also very important that you trust your instincts and choose someone who makes you comfortable and supported. And that's all. That's it for today's episode of Tea with Tanya. I hope you found this discussion or these questions to ask your birth worker helpful. I did my very best to help you guys. These are some real questions. These are all questions that I pulled from the questions that clients oftentimes ask me. So I hope this was helpful. Tell a friend to tell a friend. If you aren't expecting, you know someone who's expecting, these are all questions that you should be asking. So I hope this was helpful for you. Be sure to tune in next time for more great conversation on these topics. Until then, guys, take care, and I will see you back here next week in the tea tasting room.